Hey, I'm back with another meta report. I'm going to break down the data more this week than I did last week as we dig into win rates, and I'll look at example deck lists for the top 5. We also have a sizable paper tournament to look at. If you want to see more deck lists, I'll link the Lorcana meta subreddit below, where you can find tournament reports and top player deck lists. Real quick, thank you Pavel for the data, and thank you Gigabyte, Gavin, and Terrence for making it into readable infographics. Looking at the meta representation, there's been some changes. Well, the top 3 haven't changed, but Amethyst Emerald rises to the 4th spot after showing some promising win rate data the last 2 weeks. We dove into the deck about 2 weeks ago to see if the hype was real, and the results are in. The hype is real. Finishing the top 5 is Sapphire Steel. I'll show the ramp list we had success with this last week. What stands out this week is that the other decks have higher collective representation than Amber Steel. This shows a diverse and less predictable ladder experience. It might be less people trying to grind ladder and more people brewing or trying other decks. I think if you want to climb ladder, it's safe for this week to stick with the Amber Steel or Ruby Amethyst and take advantage of the adventurous meta. Now, I want to dig into the data for the top 15 decks and their win rates against the top 5 decks. This graphic is great, but overwhelming, so I've cut it into segments of 3 so it's easier to follow along. Looking at the top 3 and starting with Amber Steel, what stands out to me is that low win rate against Control. That 47% is a 5% drop from last week. Either Control has adapted or the most popular lists have changed. I noticed an uptick of the hybrid variants last week after Steadfast posted his guide and gameplay, but I wouldn't imagine it having a worse matchup against Control. I'm curious where this data goes next week. On to Ruby Amethyst. I don't think the data has looked better for the deck. Its worst matchup against the top 5 is just 49.4%. I know lists have cut BLT and switched to Pongo and Goofy and are running a bigger Broom package. Has that really been enough to swing the Amber Steel matchup that much? Maybe. On to 3rd place with Amber Sapphire. The data looks worse for the deck again this week, with a less than 50% win rate against the top 2 and just a pretty even matchup spread against the other decks. I'm personally curious about the deck because it still puts up results in the hands of experienced players despite what this data looks like. On to the next segment. The 4th spot goes to Amethyst Emerald, a deck that has gotten a lot more attention since its ridiculous win rate data popped up 2 weeks ago. The data doesn't look good for it this week though. With the increased attention, I'm sure a lot of inexperience with the deck is influencing the lower win rate though. I'm still keeping an eye on this deck, and it is putting up results. Finishing the top 5 is Sapphire Steel, and wow, this data looks terrifying. You were supposed to save us from the meta. What happened? I personally think this is the biggest example of how hard it is to pair the data to a deck list. There are a lot of different opinions on the deck, and I haven't found the consensus best list. This stands out as a huge barrier for the deck when you compare it to Ruby Amethyst Control, which has a large group of dedicated players offering insight and guides to improve, which then becomes a great resource for newer players. Those newer players wanting to get better at the deck have clear direction from multiple experienced players, and they become better faster. On to the 6th spot with Amber Emerald. Perhaps it was bumped down too soon, showing a positive win rate against 3 of the top 5 this week. Now, number 7 goes to Amethyst Sapphire. This is the 2nd week in a row it's showing favorable data against most of the meta. We've explored the deck here, and I really like its position against a field full of mid-range and control. If you're looking for an off-meta deck to climb ladder this week with, the data is pointing here. Amber Amethyst is next. It's got a wild matchup spread as the purest aggro deck we have, but it's not looking good this week. Emerald Steel comes in 9th. Nothing crazy here, but the deck is all over top lists in France. I want to look more into why it's succeeding. I'll show the rest of the data here, but with so few games representing this data, it's not fair to make a conclusion. That 81% win rate looks nice for Emerald Sapphire. My Amber Ruby players out there are doing decent. Ruby Sapphire is giving someone a 57% win rate against the Titans. Way to go. Alright, but that's it for the Pixelborn data. On to paper events. We had the largest event so far. Convention Octagonis had 128 players turn out, and top 8 played to the finish. I want to spend a little more time looking at this event. It's our first sizable event, and I think we can put a little more weight into it. Here's the winning list. Amber Steel Midrange took this event, beating Ruby Amethyst Control in the finals. Interesting to see 3 fire the cannons here. We've seen most lists cut it and run the full force smash, but Landstark wanted to be better equipped against aggro. 2nd place went to Madazzo with Ruby Amethyst Control. Notably, they ran a 65 card list, but the deck looks pretty stock. 3rd, 4th, and 5th all went to Amber Steel Miracle. Interestingly, 2 of them were running 2 Rapunzel. I think it's a good showing that the deck can place high without a full playset. I think 4 is correct, but if you want to play the deck and don't want to buy Rapunzels, it's still going to do well for you. This is where I question how much we can weight paper events still. Are these lists perfect? Did they intentionally play 2 Rapunzel, or could they just not afford 4? I don't know, but I'll run through the rest of the top 8. The deck lists are still solid. 6th went to Amethyst Emerald Tempo. Like I mentioned earlier, we've seen this deck pop up a lot more lately, and it seems to be the real deal. 7th place was Emerald Sapphire Tempo, Aggro, Midrange, Ramp? I don't know what to call this. Emerald Sapphire Blender? And lastly, 8th went to Amethyst Sapphire Ramp. Nice. That's it for this week's meta report. Thank you for watching and have a magical day.